What if I told you the MUTO was completely avoidable and Godzilla was just there to bring correction? Hello devoted geeks and welcome to Geek Devotions, a show from a couple devoted geeks devoted to let people know that they are loved. I'm so glad you hit the play button and you are joining us here today. Why am I so happy you're joining us today? Because this is week 3 of King of the Monsters month, and it has been a fun month so far. We've had special guests on our podcast, and we've had all kinds of really cool things happening. And coming down the road, we have 2 special guests on our Extra Tuesday that I'm super excited about it, but we're going to talk about them at the end of this show because we're going to talk about Godzilla from 2014. As you know, we've been going through the major reboots of the Godzilla series for each episode of Geek Devotions. We talked about Gojira from 1954. Last week we talked about Godzilla from 1998. This week we're taking on 2014's Godzilla, and there were some really interesting things that took place in that. I have to say, personally, it's one of my favorite Godzilla films of all time. I really enjoyed it. I know that some people didn't like it simply because it was an American film. There's a couple of key things that were missing, but I really enjoyed this particular film. And what I found interesting was certain elements that took place. If you're not familiar with this particular version of Godzilla, essentially what happens is after some government testing, we awoke some sleeping giants, if you will. It turns out Godzilla and all the other monsters have been around for a long time. They weren't necessarily created because of nuclear testing, but because of the nuclear testing that we've been doing, they were drawn out from underneath the ground. And back in the 50s, we tried taking out Godzilla. Didn't end up too well. But that being said, there were some of these little parasite spore things that laid eggs in the carcasses of an old Godzilla, and one of them hatched back in 1999, which didn't end well because it took out an entire power plant. Flash forward 15 years later, the MUTO has hatched and he is wreaking havoc, and Godzilla has come to bring things back into order. And as they go through the movie, we discover that there were 2 spores that were discovered back in 1999, and the second one was stored away in this, essentially it was a dump for all of our nuclear waste here in the United States. And they thought, well, it's dormant, it's dead, we can ignore it, it's done, we're done with it, right? What they didn't realize, though, is that thing had been feeding on the nuclear power and waste in that building for 15 years, and it grew and grew and became pregnant. Awkward. Now, you guys really need to go watch this film. I kind of just skimmed the basics of it, but there were some aspects of it that really caught my attention that I really want to point out for this week's episode of Geek Devotions. And as simply as this, the MUTOs, everything that took place was completely avoidable. You see that all they had to do really was destroy the spores of these MUTOs, these giant flapping, stomping creatures that were basically parasites and just wanted to just lay eggs and just take over the world. This really was a situation that was caused because of the people. They were like, well, we can handle this. We'll just put it in a closet. We'll hide it away. The issue's done and over with. But it wasn't fully handled. And because of this, the situation grew and became much, much worse. And out of response of the chaos, because of the response of the imbalance of things, Godzilla came about. He rose from the water to handle business. But the reality is he never had to do it if we, the humans, had just taken care of the MUTOs on the front end. This got me thinking about life and in general and people. We deal with all kinds of things as we go through life. We deal with anger, we deal with frustration, disappointments, unforgiveness, and sometimes we act like we've handled it. We're like, yeah, we're good, and we stash it away. We bury it in some place so where we figure nobody else will see it. And the real problem is it was never really fully resolved, and we allow that thing to grow. We allow that thing to fester until it becomes this massive rampaging beast that's causing a lot more damage than we could have ever expected. The feelings of hurt and pain that we go through, they're a real issue, and they can become, if you will, a root of bitterness in our lives. They can become such a stronghold that they just kind of, to use the word trigger at any moment. They really can. Why? Because we haven't handled the hurt. We haven't handled the root cause that has taken place in our lives for these things to be there. So what happens? There has to become correction. sometimes when things get so chaotic, so crazy, there has to be a time of correction, and it's devastating. In the movie Godzilla, I mean, he did almost as much damage as the MUTOs did. But can you imagine what had happened if he had never shown up? If he had never stepped foot on land to take care of these MUTOs? Yeah, the government had some plans in place to do it, but as we saw, it wasn't going to end well. These things fed off nuclear bombs, and we're going to feed it to them? That was making a lot of sense. So here comes Godzilla, bringing correction because he has to, and it's devastating, I know. And I want you guys to know that when there's correction that's brought to you to fix a major issue in your life, I know it hurts and I'm sorry. And sometimes it's so devastating in your life because everything seems like it's falling apart. Why is it falling apart? Because you've compartmentalized these issues, these pains, and you push them to the side. And it takes a little bit of work to handle those things. And I'm sorry that it hurts. But the reality of things is this. When God brings correction, it's not because he's angry at you. It's not because he's being mean or being a jerk. It's because he loves you. Because he cares about you. He was trying to bring things back to balance. Hebrews 12 verse 5 through 6 says this. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives. In that passage, we're told explicitly that the correction that we go through sometimes, that God brings to us, it hurts sometimes, and it's painful. But it's because he loves us. It's because he cares about us. A true father brings correction to raise up their child and help them become better than what they could have been. They bring correction because they know that they continue down this path where things are going south. The end result will be much worse than a little swat that they got on the backside. You know what I'm saying? I know it's not really PC to say to swat your kid, but I mean, sometimes it happens. A lot of people shy away from the subject because there have been abuses in the world. There have been people coming in the name of doing right. They're coming with a thought process that they're going to bring justice, but they're coming with an ill spirit. And instead of allowing the Father, God, to bring the correction, they themselves thrust themselves in a situation of authority and say, I will bring a correction. Or, I don't know why they're yelling. But but they do these things. And again, you got to understand they're coming from a loving heart. And I want to encourage you, if you've been burned that way, forgive those people. Because I guarantee you, they didn't necessarily mean to hurt you. Or they had the greatest intentions because they're walking this out just as much as you are. And they themselves have been through correction and they know how things run. So forgive them. And allow the true Father, the Father in heaven, God, to bring healing to you. Jesus died on the cross for us so that we can have healing. And that's what I'll encourage you guys with. There's healing in the correction. And I know it sucks. I know it's hard at times. But if you power through, not just grit your teeth and but allow the healing to take place, I promise you, things will be better in the end. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Geek Devotions. I really appreciate you hanging out with us. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and become part of our wonderful, devoted geek community.
Also, if you like the shirt that Dallas is wearing, if you agree that Kaiju just wants a taco, please head on over to Redbubble, get your shirt. Also, when you get your shirt, post pictures and hashtag Kaiju wants a taco.
Yes.
And you may get focused, not focused.
Featured.
What's the word? Featured on our Instagram.
Heck yeah. On your screen now, you see a couple examples. We had a guy that bought it in white. We had a couple of people who bought it in purple. So that was kind of cool. Actually, it's called eggplant.
Very technical term.
And I just got an email the other day that somebody got it in green. All these really cool things. But guys, do us a favor. Send us your pictures at geekdevotions@gmail.com or post up on Instagram. But make sure you tag us and use that hashtag. So that being said, speaking of wonderful things happening with Geek Devotions, you need to stay tuned to our podcast, because this weekend we're going to have our special friend Francisco Ruiz of Retro Rewind Podcast as we talk about Godzilla from 2014.
And Christy.
Yes.
Christy.
Francisco and Christy.
I won't be outnumbered.
Yes. It's true. So it's going to be really cool. Super excited to have them on there. And the following week, we're going to have Paul J. Powers, also a Virtual Rewind podcast, on our podcast, Com Talk by Geek Devotions, which you can find on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, and Stitcher Radio. So check those out. And there's a couple other really cool things happening down the pipeline, like our Extra Tuesday. So that's what's happening this Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Our Francisco, who we have previously mentioned, is going to become the King of the Monsters!
Dun, dun, dun!
No, for real. He's going to be streaming a game called King of the Monsters on our channel. He does streaming every Friday night with all his different retro games, and then he has offered to come and do the same for us on our channel because we do not have the setup to stream at the current moment.
Yes.
So he is going to do that. So if you like that, if you want us to stream, let us know. We'll put a little bit more effort into making that happen.
So check it out. It's going to be really awesome. He's playing King of the Monsters, which is an old SNK arcade game. Super excited about it. It's a lot of fun. And I talked to one particular individual, and they may or may not be making an appearance to discuss some really cool kaiju fact bombs while Francisco plays. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited about it. And now it's time for your question of the week, and it simply is this. This particular movie is the first one of our King of the Monsters month where we see Godzilla fight other beasts, other kaiju. So my question is this. What's your favorite enemy kaiju that Godzilla's ever fought? And if you don't have one, what would one look like that you made? If you're like, I'm going to send this kaiju out to fight Godzilla, what would it look like and how would it function? Leave comments down below, let us know. And also, obviously, leave us some comments, let us know about what your thoughts are on our devotion from today.
There you go. Well, don't forget to check out all of our stuff, all the socials, the podcast, all that fun stuff. So, till we see you next time, stay devoted.
Peace and love, guys.